The Second World War showed the world many examples of unprecedented heroism as well as personal and collective feats. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, this war showed the lowest and most monstrous side of human nature. This story is exactly about such ugly events. The war in the Pacific region was of an unstable nature, fading and then flaring up again. From time to time, one side or the other prevailed. After Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the Japanese army victoriously and quite quickly captured most of the numerous islands of the Pacific Ocean, as well as a significant part of the mainland of Indochina, and reached India. And then the problems began. The Japanese military did not take into account the logistic complexity of this region, and most importantly, they miscalculated the ability of the Americans to quickly rebuild the economy and to begin mass production of ships, aircraft, and submarines in quantities that Japan could not even dream of. In the occupied territories, the Japanese set up camps for prisoners of war soldiers and officers of the armies of Great Britain, France, Canada, Australia, the USA, and at the same time for representatives of the local population. The attitude of the Japanese military authorities toward the prisoners was ruthless. Various medical experiments were performed on the prisoners. People were tortured just for sake of getting sadistic pleasure. For example, Surgeon C.H. Okada loved to pour almost a bucket of water into prisoners through a hose and then jumped on the prisoner's swollen stomach. Lieutenant Asuki, nicknamed the Black Prince, carried out a rampage on the construction of the railway in Burma. He liked to beat the prisoners for no reason. For the slightest wrongdoing, he could easily kill a person. In Japanese concentration camps, one could often find prisoners without arms or legs. Limbs were cut off by the guards for any offense, for the sake of a medical experiment, or just for no reason. Here's the story of a detachment of about 200 British soldiers who surrendered on the island of Java. The Japanese put each Englishman in bamboo cages 1 meter by 1 meter, designed for the transporting pigs, and in these conditions transported them to the nearest port, where they were loaded onto a barge. The barge sailed from the shore into the sea, and the prisoners were thrown into the ocean right in their cages. All of them drowned or were eaten by sharks. Cannibalism. But all of the above are not the most brutal atrocities. The Japanese Nazis really reached the bottom. They turned to cannibalism. A significant part of the cases of cannibalism in the Japanese army occurred due to the disruption and long-term lack of supply of the troops with the most basic necessities. This was due to the fact that many concentration camps were located on the islands, and with the start of successful operation by American aviation, submarines and ships, supplies were disrupted. So the Japanese soldiers did not come up with anything better than to use prisoners of war as food for themselves. Nika Hatem Ali, a member of the British Army of Indian origin, who was a prisoner of war in New Guinea, recalled, "The Japanese began to select prisoners. Every day the soldiers selected and ate one prisoner. I myself saw how this happened. About 100 prisoners were eaten." However, it is impossible to justify Japanese cannibalism only by poor supplies and starvation in the garrisons. The fact is that even where the supply situation was more or less normal, there were still cases of cannibalism. One of the most famous cannibals of the Japanese army was General Yoshio Tachibana, the head of the garrison on the Chichijima archipelago, whose main base was located on Bonin Island. Tachibana often ordered the national Japanese dish sukiyaki, liver with vegetables. However, the liver for the general and his guests was sometimes cut off from prisoners of war who were there on the island. Moreover, for some reason, the Japanese cannibal in the guise of a general preferred to feast on the livers of American or Australian pilots more than other prisoners, usually enjoying this dish with sake, rice vodka. Why he primarily preferred pilots is unknown. Maybe he considered them people who are closer to the gods, or for some other reason. We will never find out. According to various sources, in order to satisfy the perverted gastronomic tastes of General Tachibana, from 1 to 2 dozen captured pilots were killed. Moreover, the heads of 2 of them the general cut off personally. The fact that cannibalism was practiced in the Japanese army not only due to hunger is confirmed by the testimony of prisoners in Indochina, where supplies were also quite tolerable. However, even there, in some Japanese units, this terrible act was practiced. Officers and soldiers of the Japanese army did not disdain to snack on liver, heart, or tenderloin from a prisoner of war they had killed. Sometimes they ate a local resident who might have been sent there for forced labor. According to Professor Toshiyuki Tanaka, cannibalism was a form of asserting one's superiority and rallying ranks. Tanaka writes, "Of course, on rare occasions, Japanese soldiers suffered from starvation, but basically they were not hungry at all and were in good shape. They had enough potatoes, rice, and dried fish. Often cannibalism was practiced in the group on the instructions of the commander. So probably the soldiers should have felt victory over the enemy and united even more because together they broke the taboo." According to the testimony of those who were tried in a war crimes case at the Tokyo Tribunal, 7 were sentenced to death. Among them were 5 cannibals: General Tachibana, Admiral Mori, Major Madba, Captain Ishii, and military doctor Teraki. It is curious that during the process it turned out that the legislation of none of the victorious countries there was a law punishing cannibalism, and there was no such